I've been rewriting an application for my new course that displays GIFs or things like GIFs from Reddit. You give the app a subreddit and it will give you GIFs from that subreddit. So a big part of this obviously is fetching posts from the Reddit API. But I'm sort of abusing the Reddit API in a way it isn't really designed for, and this leads to some pretty complex cases to handle. So this is how I wrote the code to handle this initially, and I asked people on Twitter how they might improve it. As you can see, there are a lot of operators being used here, and in general it's a kind of intimidating looking stream. I'm going to show you an improved version of this in just a moment, and we're going to build it out step by step. But first I want to walk you through how I came to the new solution. I think there is some important context that will add to the learning in the rundown I'm about to give you, but if you want to jump straight to the action, you can just go to this timecode. We're going to start with some pretty simple operators, but by the end we will be using operators you might not have even heard of. Although we will be looking at an improved version of this, even this initial version performs a pretty complex task quite nicely. The general idea is that we combine the settings and pagination streams to get the data we need to make the appropriate request to the Reddit API. So to make the appropriate request, we're going to need to know what subreddit the user wants GIFs from, how many GIFs they want back, what sort order they want to use, where we're currently up to in the pagination. So we make our request and then map the return data into the format we need. Once we have our data, we create a side effect with tap to emit our new values along with the old values on a behavior subject, which essentially serves as our cache of GIFs. Each time we load more GIFs, we're going to be adding it to this subject. So there is some room for improvement here, as you'll see in a moment, but in the end, we still have a reactive result that does its job well. We will be able to create a single stream that we can subscribe to with the async pipe in the template to display our GIFs. Now, apart from some minor suggestions, it was seeming like most people were fine with the general approach, and that was until Simi entered the chat. So I'll link to the Twitter threads in the description if you want to follow along with some of the back and forth of how this evolved, but Simi made some fantastic suggestions and eventually settled on this general structure to the situation. This was, I think, a massive improvement over what I was currently doing and highlighted a gap in my RxJS knowledge, which was the role of the scan operator. But we will talk a little bit more about that later. So using Simi's approach allowed me to get rid of some of the unnecessary side effects I was using, like storing cached GIFs in a behavior subject. Instead of having a stream that relied on side effects nexting values in some other stream, it could all just be handled directly in the one stream. Now, I still don't think nexting values in side effects is inherently wrong. Feel free to call me out on that, but in my mind, this is the basic principle that NGRX component store uses for state management. But that said, I do like the solution Simi's recommendations led to a lot more. So I started implementing these suggestions, but one key element missing was the need to keep retrying to fetch GIFs from the API if the initial set did not return enough GIFs to fill a page. So if we want 30 GIFs per page, but we were only able to get, say, 10 valid GIFs back from the API. So again, some more back and forth, and both Simi and Chow recommended seeing if the expand operator would do the job. And that's another RxJS operator that I had never used before. And we'll touch on what that does exactly later. So this led to the final solution, which I think is really nice and clean if you know what's going on. If you aren't super familiar with RxJS, then this might look like madness. This is a great example to teach though, because we use so many different RxJS operators in a necessary and realistic way. Often it's hard to find good examples to demonstrate what RxJS operators do in a real world context, say rather than just multiplying numbers together or something like that. So what I'm going to do is rebuild this from scratch step by step and explain why each new operator is necessary as we go. So let's strip things right back to the beginning with just a simple HTTP request. So there isn't anything dynamic going on here. We just make a request to the Reddit API for the GIFs subreddit. You can see we've hard-coded that value there. And rather than returning the data from the Reddit API in its default form, we map it to a format that is more usable in the app. Specifically, we call the convert Reddit post to GIFs method, which handles returning GIFs in this format. And we will also find the best source for the GIF, whether that is MP4, GIFy, WebM, or whatever. So as you can see on the right here, this works, but we want to take the user's input into consideration. Specifically, we want to allow them to change the subreddit we are fetching GIFs from, and we want to take their settings into account as well. For example, how many GIFs they want to display per page and the sort order they want to use. Now what we are doing is passing in the form control for the subreddit bar on the home page. And this will give us access to the value changes observable so that we can react to the values changing in this bar over time. So we set up this stream here, but we don't just use the default value changes stream. We pipe on some operators to return a modified stream. So the value is going to change every time a user types a letter into the subreddit bar. So if they are typing GIFs, for example, we don't really want to hit the Reddit API each time a letter is typed, just when the typing is done. So debounce time will wait for 300 milliseconds of no input before emitting its value. And we also use distinct until changed, so that if the subreddit value does not change, then the stream won't emit. So if the user types GIFs and then backspaces to GIF and then goes back to GIFs again, nothing will happen. We then combine this subreddit stream with a stream of the user's settings into a single stream. So combine latest will wait for both of these streams individually to emit a value, and then it will emit the latest value from both of these streams. And you can see that we are able to access those values here. This will give us an array of values, and we are just using destructuring to grab both of those here. So now that we have the values we need, we can use the switch map operator to switch to our original HTTP stream and utilize those values from the two other streams. So switch map is how we get those values out of this stream and pass it into a new stream. If we were to get rid of this switch map, for example, all we would be getting back is a stream of the values for subreddit and settings, which isn't very useful to us. We want a stream of GIFs from Reddit using those values. So now if we take a look at the app, we will see a bit of a problem. There's no GIFs. But if we type into the subreddit bar, we will see that it works, and it will actually take into account the subreddit we want now. So if I change this back to chemical reaction GIFs, we will see that subreddit will actually load and display the GIFs just as we want. And as well as that, it's taking our settings into account, which is currently set to 30 per page. So there's going to be 30 GIFs displayed here. But back to our problem, we have a blank page. So the problem is that combine latest needs all of its input streams to emit at least once before it will start emitting. So that means that if our settings values emit, which they are, but the subreddit hasn't emitted a value yet, we're not going to get any values for this stream. So to fix this, we are going to concatenate two streams together using the concat creation operator. So the of creation operator here will just return an observable stream that emits the value GIFs. So if we concat this stream with our subreddit stream, we will get a stream that emits GIFs first as its first value, and then whatever value changes come from our subreddit form control after that. So as you can see here, even if I refresh the app now, we have some default GIFs showing because this is emitting GIFs. So both of these have emitted now, and we can fire off this request and load in the GIFs. And for those of you with some RxJS knowledge, you might wonder why I didn't just use the start with operator here. We could just say start with GIFs, for example, and that would tell this stream to start with the GIFs value, and then it would just do whatever after that. So this is easier, but the problem is that the debounce time will also apply to this default value. And so it's going to cause an unnecessary 300 milliseconds of delay before we load in those default GIFs. So if we don't want that 300 millisecond delay for that first value and just for that first value, then this is a way that we can do that. So we're making some good progress here, but I've got this infinite scroll loader set up at the bottom of this list, which currently does nothing. We can pull in our initial set of GIFs and we can even change subreddits, but if we want to load more GIFs from that same subreddit, we can't do that yet. So now it's time to add some pagination. So the way the Reddit API works for pagination is that you just give it an after value at the end of the URL, and that after value will be the name of a post. And if you do that, it's only going to return results that come after that specific post. So basically what we want to do is set the last GIF we have loaded as the after GIF. Okay, so let's check out what is required for this. So I've introduced this new pagination stream now, which will bring the current pagination values into our little RxJS soup we have going on right now. So our new ingredients to get the final result we want is the subreddit stream, the settings stream, and the pagination stream as well. So this is going to give us our after value, which we need to give to the Reddit API. And we're also going to keep track of the infinite scroll event, which is what we need to let Ionic's infinite scroll component know when it's finished. So when the data has finished loading, we need to call the complete method on infinite scroll. So this is very specific to just the Ionic situation here. And these other two values I'm not going to talk about right now, but they are going to become important soon. So first what we do is use tap to create this side effect on the subreddit stream whenever it changes. So we want to reset our pagination every time the subreddit changes. And this is going to allow us to do that. Now, there is an important detail here, and it was one of the key changes I mentioned that Simi suggested at the start. So you might expect to see the pagination stream combined with the settings and subreddit streams here, just in the combine latest, because this is all just information we need to make our request to the Reddit API. But instead, we're actually making use of the pagination stream down here within the switch map. So this will become more important in the next step, but the reason we are doing it this way is that we want a totally new set of values with no previous GIFs present when the subreddit or settings values change. So when one of these two values change, we want a whole new value emission on this stream we have set up here. However, when the pagination changes, we don't want a completely new set of values. We want to keep these existing values and keep adding to them. So if I already have one page of GIFs and I load up another page of GIFs, I want to combine both of those results. I want to add the new data to the previous data. I don't want to just dump and forget about the data that I've already retrieved. So we're going to see this in action in the next step, and hopefully that makes this all clearer, but I just wanted to show you why we have separated the pagination stream like this. And you might also notice that we are using concat map instead of switch map here. So these two operators do almost the same thing. They take values from one stream and allow us to pass it into another stream that we are then returning. So in this case, I'm taking the pagination value from the pagination stream and I'm making use of that in the HTTP stream here, just like I'm doing with subreddit and the sort. However, when switch map gets a new value, for example, when the subreddit or settings change, it will immediately cancel any ongoing work from the previous emission, and it's going to immediately switch to the inner observable with the new values. It's going to cancel the old request, even if it's not finished yet. Now, this makes sense for our changing subreddit, for example, because if we type GIFs and then we change it to chemical reaction GIFs, we no longer care about the work of fetching from the GIFs subreddit because we aren't interested in that anymore. We don't need to complete that request. However, for our paging, if we try to load the third page before the second page has completed loading its data from Reddit, we want to make sure the request for the second page completes before we attempt to load the third page, otherwise everything is going to be out of order. So this is what concat map does. It will wait for the previous observable to complete, and once it has completed, it will begin the work for the next emission. So with all that in place, what we can do to trigger the next page loading is to call our next page method from the Reddit service with whatever the last GIF's name was. And you can see I have implemented that method in here. We have this next page now, and all this does is just emit a new value on the pagination stream. And we pass in the after value and our infinite scroll event as well. So when we do emit a new value on this stream, that is going to trigger all this to run again. Now, if we take a look at this in action and try to load a new page of GIFs, we can see that it kind of works, but what is actually happening here is that we are just replacing the GIFs that we already loaded with the new page. So if I scroll up now, we can see that we're looking at different GIFs. We're looking at the next page of GIFs. But this isn't what we want. When we load new GIFs, we want those GIFs to be added to the existing ones, and I want to see them popping up below here. Now, this sort of paging behavior might be preferable, for example, if you were doing a sort of style of paging where you have, page 1, page 2, you click on it, you go to a completely separate page. But in this case, we want that infinite scroll kind of paging. And so we're going to need to make a slight change to our stream to handle this. So this was one of the other key changes that Simi suggested, using the scan operator. So if you're familiar with the reduce method of an array, the scan operator is very similar. In fact, RxJS even has a reduce operator as well, which also acts similarly to scan, but there is an important difference. So you can see we've set up this stream here, GIFs for current page, which is just what we were doing before. And so what this stream is doing is it's emitting GIFs required for a particular page one at a time. And that's the problem we had before. When we loaded a new page, it just emitted a new set of GIFs, and then we were displaying that one instead. What we actually wanted to do was add the new one to the previous one. So what our scan operator will do is essentially collect all of these emissions into one result. So every time GIFs for current page emits, we will get the previous values that the scan operator has collected and the current new emission. We then just return whatever we want to pass forward as the previous value for next time. So in this case, we just add the current page of GIFs to all of the previous ones in a single array. So this accumulates values over time, again, very similarly to a normal reduce method for arrays, but reducing an array just happens all at once instantly, whereas a scan or a RxJS reduce happens over time with observable stream emissions. I mentioned an important difference though. If we were to use the reduce operator, and I specifically mean the RxJS reduce operator, not the reduce method of an array, what the reduce would do is collect all of the emissions for GIFs for current page. And then once the GIFs for current page stream has completed, it will emit all of the collected values once as a single emission. However, what scan will do is it will still collect all the emissions together, just like reduce is doing, but it also is going to emit all of its collected values every time new values are added. So it won't wait for the stream to complete. It's going to emit new values as soon as it has them. So as you'll see in a moment, this will be important for us because we want our GIFs to be displayed as soon as they are available. We don't want to wait for every single GIF to be loaded in before displaying them, which is the behavior we would get if we used reduce. Okay, we're almost there, but there is one final case we need to handle, and it is going to involve using probably the most interesting operator that we have seen so far. If we take a look at the pixel art subreddit, it's going to highlight a problem we have. So you can see that not a full page of GIFs is able to load here. A full page is 30, and this is not 30 GIFs. So this is because although this subreddit often has some GIFs, most of the posts are not GIFs. So from the 100 posts we pull down from Reddit, we can't find enough valid GIFs to fill a full page. So ideally what we want to do here is, if we see we don't have enough GIFs, to keep hitting the Reddit API for more posts until we do. So we are now looking at the final version of this, where we have added the expand operator. And it's also worth noting that I have replaced the HTTP request with this method that performs the request for us. With the expand operator, we are going to be launching the request again. So this just removes some duplicate code. You can see this fetch from Reddit method just does the same request with whatever values are passed into it. But an important addition here is the catch error operator, which will prevent the stream from breaking if an error occurs. For example, without this catch error, if we were to make a request to a subreddit that doesn't exist, it would just stop the whole stream from working until we refresh the app, because the stream would error, it would break, it would be destroyed, and everyone would be sad. And we also have this strange addition of GIFs required, but we will come back to that in a moment. So we make our request to Reddit, and then we pipe on this expand operator. So what is going to happen here is that the value from our initial request will be passed into this expand operator as normal. So we're going to get the values from Reddit, and this index represents how many times this expand operator has run. So we do some logic here to figure out if we have enough GIFs yet, and whether we should keep trying to load more. So this is why we have that GIFs required value, because we're using it to keep track of how many more GIFs we need to load. So initially we're going to need to load 30 GIFs if we have a page of 30, and then we might need to load 22, then 7, and so on. So this number should keep decreasing until we have enough GIFs, and then that will cause should keep trying to fail. And this is the key part down here, deciding what to do when should keep trying returns false. So if we have our expand operator return an observable, it is going to take the value from that observable stream and run this code again with the new result. So if should keep trying is true, we will make another request to Reddit and then check if should keep trying is true again. So if we still need to keep retrying, we will again make another request, and this code will keep running recursively until we return an empty observable. And this is the stopping condition for this recursive process. Now you might wonder what is happening to all of these GIFs that are returned by the fetch from Reddit stream every time we call it. So even though expand causes this code to keep looping and keep making new requests, each time we get an emission from this stream, when we get some results from Reddit, the value will pass through to the rest of the operators in the stream. So let's say our first request to Reddit only got 10 valid GIFs back, but we need 30. So this is going to cause should keep trying to be true. So that means that this fetch from Reddit is going to be triggered, but those 10 GIFs that we just loaded from our initial request here, those are still going to be passed through and they're still going to emit with this scan operator. So then our second request will complete. Let's say we got 10 more. Now we have 20 of 30, but that's still not enough. So again, the fetch from Reddit stream is going to get triggered again, and those extra 10 values we just got will pass through again. Now this time our should keep trying is going to be false, assuming that we got at least another 10 GIFs, because we know from the GIFs required value that we only needed 10 more. So if we get 10 back this time, we know to stop. So we return the empty observable, so no more requests get triggered, and our final 10 values get passed through to be emitted with all of the rest. So if we take a look at this in action now, you can see we now are getting enough GIFs to fill an entire page, even in this pixel art subreddit. So it's worth noting that this is a very atypical example. You'll very rarely have to use this many operators for an RxJS stream, and some of the operators here you'll rarely use at all, if ever. This was the first time I've ever used the scan or expand operators. Although now that I understand it, I can definitely see myself using the scan operator more often. I doubt I will often need to use the expand operator, but I'm definitely glad to have that in my back pocket now if I do need it at some point. But it is really cool to see just how powerful RxJS is. Even for a kind of crazy situation like this, it seems like there really is an operator for just about everything. And with the help of people like Simi and Chow, we might just be able to figure out how to use them properly. So if you're on Twitter, make sure to go follow them. I'll have links in the description. But I do want to say, if you're newer to RxJS, don't let this sort of stuff intimidate you. This is sort of a highly optimized way to do something. It's something that, I had to have a back and forth with multiple people on Twitter to arrive at. So you don't necessarily have to get the best possible solution. This probably isn't even the best possible solution for your RxJS streams. The initial solution I came up with was fine. I think the key idea is just to create a situation where you can just have the one stream you can subscribe to ideally automatically in the template with the async pipe, and that's just going to give you all your values. But over time, you are going to become more familiar with more exotic sort of operators, and it's going to help you do your job better. So if you like this video and you would like to see more content like this from me, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And that's it for this video. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to catch you in the next one.